Hello there voltage modular people, PoohBear here and welcome to my channel. I'm going to do a quick technical overview of Raditch and then we'll have a look at a couple of little demonstrations of how we can make use of some of the controls. It's a straightforward 8x8 matrix and Raditch is a play on words for radio switch. So you cannot select more than one of these buttons at the same time. So it's a very quick way of obviously selecting between your different ports to your different outputs. And of course there's an off button as well, so you can actually turn it all the way off. Down the left hand side we have a CV input, and around it we've actually got an attenuator, so we can actually come here and we can obviously change what the signal is coming in. If you don't have anything plugged in, it actually works as a bit like a control knob, but to be perfectly honest, there's no point in really using this because we can use the buttons. The whole point of actually the attenuator, A, is for obviously the CV in, but more to the point, you can right click, you can do a MIDI learn, and we can take control of a MIDI keyboard and then use that to control the knobs. The SP button really is related back to that MIDI input. What I find with some MIDI controllers, with SP off, it's what I call a one-to-one. So when we're obviously looking at particular ports and we're looking at on our controller, we can get a one-to-one. When I turn SP on, it actually doubles the resolution. So some ports on some MIDI controllers, it's very hard to get that specific value. So SP will actually help it, but you have to remember what you're looking at now on the MIDI keyboard. You're going to have to halve to work it out what you're going to, which port you're actually using. We've got a 1 volt and a 5 volt. That's to do obviously with the ranges that are coming in. We have a layout mode. So at the moment you can see it's from 0 to 7 and the way it goes across. And then obviously in B it actually goes downwards. So 0 to 7, so we've got it going down. And we've got a C which is actually going diagonally across. We've also got a hold output. Now this hold output is per row. It's not per button or anything. It's actually done per row. So if I was clicking here and I had an input in and then I click down here, whatever that input is now still being stored out of there. If I come along and then hit number 3, then obviously it's going to change the input. Now, even if there was nothing plugged in there, it's going to forget what it was. So if you click on anything within the row, it's going to, it's not going to obviously hold it, even if it's blank. And if I clicked away, if it's blank, it will still be blank going out. So it's only when you're going between the rows does that kind of hold. And again, we'll look at a nice demonstration later on because it's great when you have it in this particular mode, especially with an LFO coming in. It just turns the numbers on and off, so you might just not want the numbers on there at all, especially if you're just using, by hand. You don't really need to have to know the numbers. You know, you're just trying to wire that up to that up, which is absolutely fine. And obviously, as I'm selecting, we can just fire out a simple trigger. So we might be, hey, I'm going to select this and this, and I'm going to fire a trigger off to go and do something else as well. So that's the basics of it. So actually, let's have a little deeper look and have a look at a couple of examples where you can get quite a bit more different usage, especially using the CV stuff coming in. I'm just going to wire up my spanner now, which is just a basic LFO for those who have not used it before, just so we can see some results coming through. So there we go, so we've got something coming through. So whatever row I'm going to select, you can see we've now got that LFO coming through to it. Obviously we've got this hold, so I can now hold, and if I go off, it's now going to sort of do a track and hold for them other ones. And if I want to, I can obviously click on this off, and off will actually still hold the values out. And the way to clear the values out, you just click off the hold, and that would obviously drop them back to 0. And if you're just clicking through here and you went straight to off, obviously it automatically goes to 0 as well. But it's quite handy to have this hold on for some of the tests that we're actually going to have a quick look at. So one of the first things I'm actually going to look at, I'm actually going to wire this into the LFO as well. And as you can see, as soon as it's wired up into the LFO, it's actually going to start scanning obviously all the different ports. I'm going to be honest, yes, you could have this sort of set up, but it doesn't quite make sense to have it scanning this way. However, what does make sense is, sorry, I'm just going to edit a value in here, and I'm going to change and attenuate the value down to about 5.6%. And so what that's actually going to do now, it makes a little bit more sense now. We're actually going to multiplex, really. That's exactly what we're up to. We're multiplexing now, obviously, these 8 into this one, which is absolutely brilliant. And what's really fantastic, we can just take this layout and switch it to a B, and now we're demultiplexing. So we've got a one input, and as you can see with this hold functionality, we can obviously go through and we can hold everything, which is absolutely fantastic way of sort of doing stuff. So I'm just going to unplug that for one split second. But obviously we can take this sort of thing other steps further. So how can we maybe set something up where I might have a trigger, and I want my trigger maybe to fire along either the demultiplexer or the multiplexer. Well, something like the flip-flop counter works really nice. We can obviously plug that in. I'm just going to set this back to a 1 volt range, because we need a 1 volt range, because that's what that's working on. And I'm going to put this back at 50%. Let's put that back at 50%. There we go. And I need a way to trigger this device. So now when obviously I'm clicking my go, we're starting to multiplex through. So let me just, in fact, this needs to be on 100%. Sorry, I've made a mistake there. Whoops. Just need to turn that to 100%. And I'm actually going to turn this up to 7 to start with. Let's scroll the screen down. And if you notice, this is actually jumping back to a 1. That's because of the way the flip-flop counter is set up. But we've got now this extra option. This is a new option which is coming quite recently. And this is one of the reasons why it came in recently. It's because now when we scroll down, we can jump all the way back to 0. So we can now multiplex across the whole board. Now, it could be that you've got a circumstance where, great, we want to have a trigger coming in and multiplex in between this lot. And we may have something like an LFO going between the lot, but we want to actually eventually go down to this off button. So we can actually sort of pause what we're doing. We've captured this data while we're doing other things, and then we might want to come back and sort of demultiplex the rows again and go into an off position. So can you get to an off position using CV? Yes, you can, and it's quite straightforward to do. Whatever range you're in is to actually go out of range. So if you go into a negative number, it'd automatically go to an off. And if you go above your particular range, and at the moment, so if I was to push this up to 64, so put this counter onto 64, it would also go to an off. So what we want to do, we really want to come all around, and then we want to hit the off. So how can we actually do it using this sort of setup we've got? It's not actually as hard as it sounds. So first of all, I'm just going to push this round so this is actually on a 0. And what I'm actually going to do, I'm going to sort of semi-cheat. I'm going to take this one, because if I push this one in, obviously we're going to move on 1 row. That's fair enough. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this into my big meter, and that's the figure we're pumping out. So that's the voltage. Now with big meter, I can click on that, and I'm going to copy that as a value. And then I'm going to go to my DC source. It might sound a bit long-winded what I'm up to here. And I'm going to paste it in. But before I paste it in, I'm going to put a minus in there. And then I'm going to put the figure in there. And I'm going to hit enter. Now, you may look at this and say, oh, this is now showing only 0.01 of a volt. Well, actually, if I unplug that and plug this in, let's have a look at what our meter's showing. Oh, there's our voltage, minus blah, 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 blah. Even though that's only showing 0.01, it's showing that full value. So if I was to now take that and push that into here, I'm going to unplug this device because I don't want that device anymore. And ideally, I need to go up one more step. So now, theoretically, if I go round, you can see I'm multiplexing. And then when we get down, we've now gone to our off. So I now can have a trigger, which is obviously controlling that. And then I could even have an LFO, which will whiz through all them and then stop here again. So, you know, even using something like the flip-flop counter, you could probably do something where you can say, hey, I'm going to turn off, have an LFO going through, and then once it's got to its position, you can obviously turn that back to a flop. Because don't forget, we can put the word after on. So if I was to put the word after on here, and just scroll around, so when we go back to an off, we've also gone into a flop mode. So you can do other controls. So you can use this to control stuff whilst you're controlling this into the off mode while you're controlling that stuff going through there. As I say, I think this is quite a powerful setup when you start getting into the multiplexer, demultiplexer side of things. So this ends this part of the presentation. So thank you for watching, and bye for now.